Each and every offseason, teams enter free agency with their own wants and needs in mind, and in the case of the Dallas Mavericks, or at least for their fans, such wants include signing guys like Kyle Lowry, John Collins, or even Kawhi Leonard. And while the franchise didn't accomplish those, I think they have at least done something to address the team's needs. While as expected, they've locked up their young superstar Luka Doncic until 2027 after signing him to a historic $207 million long-term supermax, and in a series of smaller moves, they've re-signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to a reasonable $74 million four-year deal. They've re-signed Boban Marjanovic, they picked up Willie Cauley-Stein's player option, they've acquired young big man Moses Brown plus a $10.8 million trade exception by trading Josh Richardson, and I think they got some really good value free agency acquisitions by signing utility wings Reggie Bullock and Sterling Brown to good contracts. And while these might not be the home run free agency moves that most people expected, I think these signings still make a lot of sense if you start to look at it based on two things, which is first, Luka Doncic ain't going anywhere for the next 6 years, which means the Mavs can afford to be patient in finding the right pieces to build around him while still staying competitive year in and year out. And second, Kristaps Porzingis is still owed $101 million for the next 3 seasons, which also means the Mavs need to be careful with making any win-now transaction for them to maintain some roster building flexibility moving forward if things don't go according to plan. So what's good guys, it's Real Balls here, and today we'll look at why the Dallas Mavericks offseason moves still make a lot of sense and why they can still win big time next season, and also why the team still has a clear path in terms of building a championship-worthy roster around Luka for years to come. So let's get to it. I think game number 7 of the first round series against the Clippers gave us a summary of the Mavs' problems. Well, if you look at it, the team's first 5 of Luka, Porzingis, Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, and Boban Marjanovic combined for a whopping 201 minutes in that game. And I mean, you know things are starting to get out of hand when you have to play Boban, who's your third string center, for 31 minutes in a game 7, while playing Maxi Kleber and Jalen Brunson just for a combined 19 minutes at the same time. Well, yeah, Luka did put up an amazing 46-point and 14-assist double-double and an amazing 57% shooting clip that night, but overall, no one other than Finney-Smith finished that game with a positive Bucks plus-minus rating, and the guy himself only finished as a +1. Well, I mean, Finney-Smith played 39 minutes that game, and he sure would have played beyond 40 minutes if only he wasn't in foul trouble. Well, the guy isn't necessarily a game changer, but you can easily see why it's necessary to have his two-way presence on the floor. He can guard multiple positions, he's a lengthy guy who can shoot from outside, he won't get outmatched in a playoff series that easily, and he just does a lot of things that helps his team win games. And what I'm saying here is, I think having 2 of him in the Mavs starting lineup could have easily changed the outcome of the series for all we know. And looking at it, this is where you'll see how valuable the Reggie Bullock signing is. And looking at the numbers, Bullock pretty much played the same amount of minutes per game and had pretty much the same shooting efficiency as Finney-Smith last season for New York. But he's also someone who shot an even better 41% from deep, also while attempting more than 6 3-pointers a game. And out of all 144 players who had at least 150 catch-and-shoot possessions last season, Bullock's 1.14 points per possession ranked 47th in the NBA. And no other guy in the Mavs roster ranked higher than him in that area last season except for Kristaps Porzingis. And Bullock was also especially effective on uncontested looks as he shot 47% from 3 when his primary defender was at least 6 feet away from him, which I think you could credit to his quick shooting release. And out of all guys who played the full year with the Mavs last season, only Maxi Kleber had a better catch-and-shoot clip on open looks at 41.7%. And I mean, there's no other guy who's better in terms of getting you uncontested looks from 3 than Luka Doncic. So yeah, Bullock's not yet known to be a real sniper from deep, but that could change by playing alongside Luka next season. And another thing is, this guy can get stops on defense too. While to be fair, playing in New York with a lot of other capable defenders just amplified his abilities on that end, but still, Bullock has great size for a wing at 6'6", and based on the eye test, he's not someone who you can easily get past. And I think the best part of this signing is that they only got him for $10 million a year. Well, I mean, you probably would have wanted Dallas to go after a guy who's more of a shot creator, but considering that two-way wings could be really expensive in today's market, Bullock is still someone who could help the Mavs spacing and defensive depth at a reasonable price. And I mean, the same can be said for Sterling Brown as well. Dallas got him for $3 million a year, but the guy actually just had his best statistical season with Houston, shooting 42% from 3 while finishing in the 88th percentile in terms of catch-and-shoot points per possession in the NBA, which number is even better than that of Bullock or that of any other guy from the Mavs roster last season. And Brown also managed to be that efficient even while playing for a tanking Rockets team which had no consistent offensive distributor, so just imagine how better this guy could even be alongside alongside Luka's playmaking. Yeah, he's not a huge signing and he'll probably play something like 10 to 15 minutes a game at most, but again, going back to Game 7 against the Clippers, the Mavs bench composed of Brunson, Kleba, Trey Burke, Richardson, and Powell only played for 38 minutes combined, so I think if Sterling Brown brings his steady 3-and-D play in Dallas, especially with his ability to play defense with his 6'5" frame, he'll still definitely be someone who can play valuable minutes for Jason Kidd off the bench. I mean, Bullock and Brown aren't secondary stars, but they should still be efficient fits to a well-orchestrated Mavs offense led by Luka. And another thing is, I'm also looking forward to the possibility that Luka's own improvement, especially on his conditioning, could still propel Dallas past where they were last season. I mean, without a doubt, Luka's already a top 5 player in the NBA, and he just kept getting better and better over his first 3 years in the league, and there's no reason to think that he won't continue to do so. I mean, Doncic averaged almost 36 points, over 10 assists, and 8 rebounds in the 2021 postseason, while making nearly half of his field goal attempts and 40% of his 3-point attempts, despite being criticized for his shooting early on in his career, and despite going up against a great defensive Clippers team which featured all NBA defenders like Kawhi and PG. And at 22 years old, he's already made as many all NBA first team selections as Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Damian Lillard combined. So who knows what this guy could still do as early as next season. And just like what he said in his contract signing press conference a few weeks ago, quote unquote, "I know we made some good moves in free agency, but I think one of the most important things to win is chemistry that the team has on the court." So to me, this is just a really good statement to hear from your franchise player because it tells you that, although Luka recognizes the importance of landing big names in free agency, he still understands the value of internal development and the patience that the Mavs need to have in terms of roster building moving forward. Well, for sure, going after a guy like Goran Dragic would definitely take a lot of pressure from Luka, and for the longest time, we've heard about the Mavs' need for a secondary playmaker and whatnot, which is totally correct. But I mean, at this point, I think the Mavs just don't have a lot of pieces to make a trade realistically work in their favor. While sending Dwight Powell's $11 million contract to Toronto might be the most realistic thing to do in terms of salary matching purposes to acquire Dragic's $19.4 million deal, but I mean, having Toronto to agree on that deal is another question since Powell could already be a redundant piece for the Raptors at this point. But maybe they could entice the Raptors by sending Josh Green plus a conditional first-round pick. I mean, for sure, Dragic is an experienced playmaker and ball handler, and last season, only 1/3 of his field goals were assisted, meaning he can create his own shot. But if you're Dallas, would you really be willing to go on win-now mode and give up more assets for a 35-year-old point guard who's had constant injury problems over the past couple of seasons when in fact, you have the time to bank on internal development and chemistry over the next 2 to 3 years? Well, no question, Luka's fast emergence accelerates the Mavs' winning timeline, but I think this doesn't mean they have to be impatient. I mean, they've already taken the shortcut 2 years ago when they gave up multiple first-rounders to New York as part of the Porzingis trade, and while I think the Mavs still got great value from that deal, or maybe even better value depending on how KP plays over the next couple of seasons, assuming they don't trade him, these types of transactions still show you that pulling the trigger to acquire a big contract could limit a team's flexibility in the future, especially if you could afford to be patient in terms of roster building, which the Mavs could have done in 2019. And so for the record, I'm still not giving up on Kristaps Porzingis at this point, because I mean, 5-man lineups with both Luka and KP last season produced 120.9 points per 100 possessions, which ranks in the 95th percentile of the league. And when healthy, Porzingis fit with Luka and the Mavs system was really good. While he only played 43 games last season because of his knee and ankle problems, but when he did gain momentum on his play during the latter part of the season, the Mavs' offensive rating was even 1 point higher than that of the Brooklyn Nets' all-time most efficient offense. So I mean, those glimpses of great synergy with Luka could easily explain why the Mavs traded for him. Getting him to stay healthy is another thing though. But if any, the guy will enter next season with a full summer of recovery and is definitely motivated to prove everyone wrong. But for sure, a huge part of how much he can be better will still depend on new head coach Jason Kidd. I mean, you gotta wonder if he'll play Porzingis more as a center where I think he can be more useful, or will he use him as a koi in big lineups where he'll definitely be stuck as a floor spacer once again. But I think if KP mostly plays the 5 at this point, he definitely needs to trust his body more like he did before. I mean, last season, he still showed glimpses of his past rim protection abilities, but the problem was, he just came fresh off surgery, and his hesitation to rotate as a big man help defender was kinda obvious throughout the year. But I mean, we'll definitely have to wait and see what a full off-season's worth of rest can do to help him. But yeah, for sure, KP's mobility might not be back to where it used to be, which would also make him a liability on the perimeter defensively, and in that scenario, trading him while getting decent assets in return might be even harder to do because of his huge contract. But like I said earlier, Dallas can afford to be patient with things because Luka is locked up until 2027 regardless, and if the worst case scenario comes into play when you can't trade Porzingis, and even if he picks up his last year player option, his contract still expires in 2024, and by that time he'll only have Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr, and maybe a few rookie scale contracts on the books, which gives the Mavs all the cap space in the world to sign maybe even 2 max free agents. I mean, guys like Jaylen Brown, Domantas Sabonis, or even Devin Booker could potentially be available that offseason. And further, I'm still not looking past the possibility that Dallas can land free agents over the next couple of years regardless of cap space situation. Cause I mean, if this year's free agency taught us something, it's that if players want to go somewhere, teams can make it happen. We've seen it with Chicago acquiring Lonzo Ball and DeRozan, and Miami landing Kyle Lowry. And as long as the Mavs have Luka Doncic, I think you just can't disregard the fact that players in their primes would want to come play with him in Dallas sooner or later. While for sure, the Western Conference is deep, but we've seen that the NBA is also leaning toward unpredictability. Next season, Kawhi and Jamal Murray will be returning from ACL injuries, and both LeBron and CP3 are also a year older, so who knows where Dallas will be. But when you have someone like Luka Doncic on your team, I think there's always a possibility to win big and exceed expectations. So, do you guys think the Mavs have a clear path towards a deep playoff run next season? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and also please do give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this content. Again, this is Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.